exercise here is to lay out a multi-sample in the NNXT. I've pre-prepared a bunch of recorder samples and we're going to load them in and set them to their correct original keys and zone patterns on the keyboard. So let's begin by browsing samples. We need to right click here, browse samples, and I've already navigated to where the samples are, just selected them all and say OK. So all the samples are now in the NNXT, and of course if I play any key I'm going to hear them all. So first thing, let's get these samples in the right order. So our lowest sample I think is going to be this guy, C2. So let's click solo sample and we can check these. Okay, so I'm just playing a single note on my keyboard, and this guy is a low one, so let's put him down here. So we'll start with our C2 wave, then we want next one is E2, then G2, then B2, then D3, F3, A3. Now they're all in order from lowest to highest. Okay, first thing, we want to set C2's original key to C2. What else? So here we go. I select the sample, I go down to here, root key, and I'm going to put this to C2. And I'm going to do the same for each of these. E2 goes to E2, and you'll notice here how valuable it is that these waves are labeled correctly. So now each sample is playing back at the correct pitch when you play its original key. But of course we want to limit where these samples play. We don't want C2 to play all over the keyboard, we just want it to play in the region of C2. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set the high and low key both to the original key. That's just, I'm starting like that as a matter of convenience. You'll see why in a second. So let's take him to C2, and then I can just drag this one down and it will of course stop when it hits C2. Right, next one, low key, is going to go to E2. This one I can just pull right down. Next one is going to go. Okay, so now I have, if I turn off solo sample now if I play these notes, each note is now playing a different sample. The notes in between, of course, are not playing anything because I've got these samples laid out on individual keys. Our low note, we're going to want to play down to the bottom of the keyboard, so I'll just stretch him as far as it will go. It's not going to sound too good down here, but that at least we can play a few notes below this pitch. And I'm going to drag him up to the bottom of this guy here. This guy I'm going to open so he plays up to this guy. This guy is going to play up to that guy. This guy is going to play up to this one. Now where you put your original key in these zones is up to you. You don't have to stretch up or stretch down. You could have the original key in the middle, but I'm just putting the original key at the bottom of the zone and having the sampler multiply the pitches upwards. And this guy at the top, of course, we can just stretch up to a high value. You play the whole keyboard, across the whole keyboard, all the notes will play. And you can hear the different samples kicking in there, I'm sure. Before we look at the synthesis parameters, I'm noting that the NNXT has miraculously looped these samples for me. If it hadn't, I would need to go in and set loop points. But the looping seems to have been taken care of. Either that was already registered in the wave, or it just found a loop point. I'm not sure about that, but I'm going to go with it. That's very, very handy. All of the waves are looped. If they weren't looped, we would now have to take care of that, and we do that at this stage. Okay, so now all the waves are looped. We want to start looking at the synthesis parameters. So there are some synthesis parameters that we want to affect everything. So I'm just going to do a Control A here and select select all the waves. Play here, and I'm going to start doing some things that I know I want to affect everything. I want the velocity to affect the level a little bit. Okay, so I'm just going to add that. Now that's working. That's working on all the zones. I want the velocity information to open up the filter a little bit. So I'm just going to do that, and of course close the filter here a little bit. Okay, so now I've got a little bit of dynamics. I think the envelope that we're hearing is pretty good. We could get very fussy and start putting a little bit of attack time in here and perhaps reducing it with velocity, so we get a more staccato approach when louder notes are played, but I don't want to do too much of the synthesis stuff at this stage. But these are the general things that I want to do for all of the samples. Now I've got to do a little bit of balancing between the samples. So having set the general settings, I'm now going to just try each sample. Okay, this guy's really quiet. This is the E sample. So I've just pulled his level up, okay? This guy up here on D is a bit loud, so I'm going to just pull him back a little bit. And I think the filter can come down a little bit on this guy too. So now we've done just a little bit of balancing between the zones. We've laid them out on the keys. We've taken care of the original pitches. We've put in some general synthesis parameters, and we've used some specific synthesis parameters to balance out the waves. Okay, so there we go. That's a very simple way to quickly lay out a multi-sample. Sounds a little bit like those old Tron flutes.